dimanche soir à Kiev lorsque la police anti-émeute est intervenue aux abords.
The song you have just heard is one by famous Ukrainian poet Shevchenko, who is a bit like a combination of Dante mixed with Dr. Seuss. Natalia, a Purdue linguistics instructor, discusses his influence at the Ukrainian Student Society meeting.
Children hear his poetry probably from their early childhood, and that's why it comes to you like, like a lullaby or something that is inseparably a part of you. So Shevchenko poetry would be that for many Ukrainians. And
with the recent difficulties Ukraine has faced, many are finding meaning and hope in the rebel poet's works.
The language was also forbidden, so it was against the law to speak or use Ukrainian language. And Shevchenko broke this law by writing poetry in Ukrainian language. And I must say that Shevchenko probably became very similar to Dante, who Dante was for Italian literature, because he brought this so-called vulgar Latin, basically showed that it's a beautiful language that deserves its own literature. And Shevchenko did the same thing. We heard a couple of lines that right now Ukraine is robbed and raped, but it will wake up and it will stand up. Or there will be this land, meaning Ukraine, will become new again, and there won't be enemies at that land. There will be mother and there will be son, and there will be new people on this land. Now the whole Ukrainian people seem to wake up again, and by the way, this waking up was a line in Shevchenko poetry talking about Ukraine, which should wake up, and at some point it will wake up for its freedom.
The latest protest in November 2013 caused anxiety for many Ukrainians in the Purdue community.
Like one of the nights I could not sleep. That was the night when the snipers were shooting at people on the main square. I could not believe that was happening, but I was watching it live.
I remember one of the days when I was trying to study for an exam and learning about the shooting that was going on in place, and that was pretty stressful for me to try to focus on my studies as I was learning about all the individuals and people being killed.
My son and his family still live there. Very concerned about them because of this recent situation, political situation in Ukraine. And I mean that it seemed like people won this battle with a corrupted government, and we all thought that now everything will be all right.
This is not the first protests that have occurred in Ukraine recently. One of the Ukrainian Student Society members, Alex, participated in the protests a decade ago.
I was a student at Kiev National University back then, and I participated in that protest from the first day till the very last day. It was an amazing protest. It was something that I think has never happened in the world history, when several million people were in the street with not a single fight, not a single broken glass, nothing. They were so peaceful and friendly to each other. They were friendly to the political opponents. The opponents were not very friendly just at the beginning, but when they saw how friendly the atmosphere was, that calmed them down, and so it was just the atmosphere of unification of the country. But that didn't work then with the president that we got in 2005.
These protests, however, were very different from last time.
No one could ever believe, even when I was in Ukraine in January, like people would not even imagine that it would end the way it ended. One of my best friends, he works as a researcher in the Institute of Mathematics in Kiev. And so he was there every single day and he saw all the hotspots live himself. So he told me as an eyewitness what was going on there. February 18th, there was a fight, major fight between the police and criminals versus the protesters. So the police was, the line of police was attacking a crowd of protesters. They were shooting, beating them and chasing them. The people started to escape, some were falling on the ground. The police would beat them and keep going, while the criminals who were following the police, they would kill everyone who was on the ground, load them in cars, load them in trucks and take them away from the scene, so that those people are not in the official statistics of dead.
After the overthrow of previous President Yanukovych, Ukrainians as a whole are working to rebuild their society.
I think that now people who lived through all these political changes in the country, now they think how we have to change our country, how we can establish these checks and balances in the country, that whoever we elect in future wouldn't matter that much for the integrity of the country itself.
However, as the country struggles to heal internal wounds, external forces are not helping.
Russia repeatedly said that it does not recognize the government we have now, even though this is an interim government. That's what happened, but ahead of the government or ahead of the country just runs away. If we have these elections, we have completely legitimate government, and Russia would have to accept that fact. And I don't think they want to. And that's why I think they started this Crimean intervention, and they may start some other possibly terrorist acts.
I would like to emphasize that not all Russians, not all people who are considering themselves to be ethnically Russians want to live with Russia, because people who can think realize that living in Russia is living under the dictatorship of Putin. Was the story of a Ukrainian military ship which was surrounded by the Russian forces in the past few days, and the commander-in-chief of the Russian army. Now, notice that Putin denies that Russian army is there, while the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy comes on board of the Ukrainian ship and asks the commander to surrender. While the commander responds, Russians do not surrender. The Russian general is shocked, like, did you say Russians? The commander repeats, yes, I am an ethnic Russian, but I gave an oath to serve Ukraine, and I have no reason to betray my oath. Half of the soldiers on this ship are ethnic Russians, but they all gave an oath that they will serve to Ukrainian state, and they are not going to surrender. And then the Russian general turns back to his soldiers and tells them, listen, this is how you should serve your country.
It's between Ukrainians and Putin. He's the one who's doing all of this. There's protests going on in Russia to try to stop the conflict, because pretty much all over eastern Ukraine has family in Russia, and vice versa. There's a lot of Russians living in Ukraine, a lot of Ukrainians living in Russia, and nobody would want to see their family members fight. And neither would my family, since I do have family members on both sides.
But probably there might be some terrorist acts or something, some kind of explosions that they would say, Russians may say, oh, look, you have some kind of instability there, we are going to help you, and then they would move with tanks. At least many people suggest that probably that would be the scenario of this kind of treacherous, different type of warfare. I must say that Putin tries different ways how he wages the war. For example, Ukraine in this case, that Ukraine did not realize that actually the war against Ukraine started maybe 2 years ago or so. It was informational war. We just didn't understand and didn't realize why Russian TV constantly was saying some kind of lies about Ukrainians. They were inventing some absolutely ridiculous, from our point of view, either events which were not true, or they were talking about people as fascists or something like that. We thought probably that these reporters, maybe just some reporters, were not aware what was going on in Ukraine. So we were trying to talk to them. We were trying to invite them, come and look. However, the same propaganda was done to Russian people. And now, right now, they truly believe that there are some kind of strange fascists in Ukraine who can be a threat to Russians. And I think Putin did that because he wanted to legitimize his invasion into Ukraine.
Some of the people here about Ukraine, I still have a feeling that they have wrong perception of what's going on there. Because I've heard one woman saying that Jews are threatened in Ukraine. And I said well, who's threatening them? They said there is a party, Svoboda, who is threatening the Jews. Well, I am a supporter of Svoboda, and I have never ever heard of any threat to the Jews in Ukraine by that party. Moreover, that's just not what the party, that's not what's bothering Ukrainians right now, for sure.
Russian propaganda and TV has been painting, especially Western Ukrainians, as Nazis, anti-Semitic, and just anti-Russians. However, that's not true because nobody wants a conflict, and I think that even the Russian citizens have told Russian government that they don't want to be protected because there's nobody actually trying to harm them.
And they wanted to show that they want to hear two opinions. They want to hear the opinion of Russians, and they want to hear the opinion of Ukrainians on those protests. So they invited someone from Russia, and they invited someone from Ukraine. But the person who they invited from Ukraine was the foreign minister of Ukraine, who was strongly pro-Russian, and he was saying precisely exactly the same things as the Russian guy. So, and they wanted to portray, well, this is what Ukrainians saying, that's what Russians saying. That's not what Ukrainians who participating in the process were saying, because he was calling them terrorists. He was calling them extremists, he was calling them Nazis. That's not objective to my point of view.
Many Ukrainian citizens are realizing that this war has been a long time in coming.
And basically, Yanukovych was a figure put in the presidency by Putin. We can be open about that, of course. But why Putin needed Yanukovych in this position? Because Yanukovych would allow Putin to do whatever Putin decided to do. I mean that they also put in all different positions Russian security people to be in charge of police, in charge of the army, and so on, in many very important positions. What these people did during these 3 years, they basically destroyed security and the army. It was completely, well, maybe not completely, but to a great degree it was basically destroyed. Weapons were either destroyed or sold out, or so the situation in which the Ukrainian army right now is not the best form, I would say.
The current events involving Russia and Ukraine are reminiscent of World War II, both in action and in the political players.
As one gentleman said, everybody who tries to compare Putin and Hitler should remember one big difference between them. Putin doesn't have mustache. Well, that's a joke, and Ukrainians often react with a joke to some things. I heard this comparison, not like Putin like Hitler, but Putin acts like Hitler. And sometimes it's surprising how close are parallels, historical parallels, how Hitler started war in 1930, before even he started war in 1938, and how he started his annexation of Crimea.
A lot of people are comparing what Putin is doing with Ukraine to what Hitler was doing with Austria and with Czech Republic when they brought in their forces, saying that they are voluntarily joining those territories to Germany, and the League of Nations, which was the analog of the United Nations now, mostly okayed that. And they okayed that once, that twice. The third time we had the Second World War happening.
As international powers search for solutions, economic sanctions are a popular option in an effort to avoid war.
Why, of course, I have big hopes for these sanctions, economic sanctions against Putin, hoping that may be that can do something to stop the bloodshed or the war itself. That people may just start thinking like, is it worth it? Maybe we should find some other ways how we want to exercise our policies. Unfortunately, even with sanctions, people start thinking, wait, if we apply these sanctions, then Russians apply sanctions to us, and we will suffer. But in case of the alternative, and the alternative could be, I don't know, I hope not, but could be even a world war, wouldn't be just better to suffer from these sanctions than suffer from, I don't know, a war that Putin may start?
The U.S. government is trying their best to put on sanctions and that kind of stuff. So I think just moral support and just understanding of what actually is going on and not giving into Russian propaganda and spreading that.
These other countries do the job. So Britain would say, why don't Germany do that? Or Germany would say, why France wouldn't do that? Let them do that. So I think if they stay united and if they apply that pressure, if they all show Putin that this is not the way how you act in 21st century, and that we do not war, all world community does not want war, I think he should hear this. At least I hope that.
Economic sanctions may be a more refined method of showing disagreement, but there are those who believe that there will be, or should be, a more aggressive approach.
Small arms, I guess, issue in Ukraine is not like here where there's 4 guns per person. We have a lot less guns and it's mostly rifles, like hunting rifles. And we have a lot of able people. I think it's around a couple of million that would be able to fight who are not in the military, but would still like to help out and keep this country sovereign, so just putting arms in their hands. I know it's not a popular opinion amongst many Americans because America has given weapons to people in Afghanistan and other countries, and that has backfired, but this is a little bit of a different conflict because this is not a group of people who's fighting. This is 2 governments that are actually going to war in Central Europe.
Russia doesn't want to give up on Ukraine. Now, Ukraine is a very strategically important country for Russia to take over. There are multiple opinions saying that, like, if Ukraine becomes democratic and Ukraine goes into the European Union, and the level of life in Ukraine will significantly be higher than the level of life in Russia, the Russian dictatorship will collapse.
If Ukraine can't be protected, then it's going to be a deterrent for Iran and North Korea to get more nuclear weapons or try to produce them, because we promised them that we'll not touch them if they don't have weapons, but clearly Ukraine gave up their weapons and they're not being protected right now. And a couple of days back, actually, the Ukrainian government announced that they will not pursue nuclear weapons program, even though they have the capability. And then we still have a lot of nuclear fuel because we have nuclear power plants. And Eastern Ukraine produces all of the intercontinental ballistic missiles for Russia. So we have the facilities to build rockets and nuclear weapons, but we're just trying to stay away and trying to join the European Union.
Ukraine traded its nuclear weapons for its safety. And therefore, it's a different story that the world must get involved, because the alternative is that if the world treaties are not respected, then countries like Iran, countries like North Korea are welcomed, will be encouraged to get new nuclear weapons, and no one will have right to stop them, because they say we're not going to trust any kind of international agreements. We need to trust only our own military. To my opinion, is to break this stereotype of the people here that the United States should not get involved in the world conflicts. Like there is a significant difference between the conflict in Ukraine versus the conflicts in other places in the world, because the United States did not give guarantees that they will protect the other places in the world, while with Ukraine there are certain agreements that should be fulfilled, and it will be a very dangerous. It may have a very dangerous consequence for the world in general if international law does not work.
I think definitely Putin didn't want to see his puppet government be overthrown in Ukraine, and didn't want to see the new government be instated. I think he's just showing power, but I also don't think he's going to stop, and he won't, because he has concentrated troops on all of the eastern borders. So I'm pretty positive there's going to be a war.
I hope that wouldn't happen, but I see how uneasy Putin and his government, how uneasy they are with Ukraine being an independent democratic country. So they will probably try to do anything possible not to let these elections happen.
As election date for Ukraine looms closer, there are concerns that another corrupt leader will climb to power. However, some believe that this can be overcome.
The most important is the general direction that country is moving towards. And I think that right now all Ukrainian people, or most of Ukrainian people, are sharing this image of future, how they want to see Ukraine, and they want to see Ukraine free, independent, democratic, pretty much like many European countries are, as close as we can get, at least to that. Hopes that our interim government that we have right now passes laws that will change irreversibly Ukraine in such a way that it won't be able to make Ukraine a kleptocracy again, that it will be a free, democratic and independent country, and that we can protect the independence of our country in case there will be some intervention from outside.
As tensions and violence increase in Ukraine, a quote from Shashenka gives hope.
І мене в сім'ї великій, в сім'ї вольній новій, не забудьте пом'янути незлим тихим словом. This is the end of his testament, where he says that after you bury me, don't cry, but get up and fight for your dignity and your freedom. And then in this new world and new free country, don't forget about me quietly.